Julian held the utility knife, his expression lost in shadow. A few crimson drops stained the polished floorboards of the dorm room, creating a startling, grim tableau. A cold knot formed in Leo's stomach. He offered an awkward apology, explaining that he hadn't known the lock on their door was broken. Julian's brow furrowed as he glanced at the useless mechanism, his gaze heavy. Leo rushed to fill the silence, suggesting that if Julian was trying to peel fruit, a utility knife was too dangerous. He had a universal peeler Julian could borrow. Julian's voice was low and unyielding, a clear that if he ever found out Leo had mentioned what he'd just seen, he should understand the consequences. Leo responded with a lightness he didn't feel, assuring him he understood completely. He figured Julian was just worried about his perfect campus idol image being tarnished by a clumsy fruit-peeling accident. Then, before he could lose his nerve, he added that while the timing was far from ideal, he wanted to know if this was a convenient moment for a confession. Julian, still holding the knife in one hand, traded his severe look for one of pure confusion. The words had barely left Leo's mouth before regret washed over him. He couldn't have picked a worse pretext. But telling Julian it was all a joke now would feel like mockery, and he didn't doubt the other man might just stab him. Julian was stunned into silence. After a long moment, he gave a curt order to make it quick. Leo managed a cheerful confirmation, which was immediately followed by a suffocating quiet. He was at a loss. He had no idea how to confess to a guy. He didn't even like guys. He was just trying something. He asked if he could take a moment to compose himself. Julian's eyes went distant, his gaze drifting to a corner of the room as he gave a non-committal hum of assent. It was Sean, Julian's roommate, who had sent Leo to their room to pick up a file, leading to this whole situation, and to the sight of Julian, apparently in the middle of self-harm. But it made no sense. Julian was the undisputed king of Northwood University. He came from a wealthy family, had founded his own tech startup as a junior, and was already speaking as a representative at the Riverwood Young Entrepreneurs Summit before even graduating. With his looks, background, and limitless future, surrounded by a legion of admirers, what kind of unsolvable problem could he possibly be facing? Frank clapped Leo on the shoulder, pulling him from his thoughts to ask about the career fair the next day. Leo slumped in his chair, groaning that they could talk about anything but work. He was just a poor, talentless soul with dreams of getting rich. Frank just rolled his eyes and switched to the latest gossip from their dorm. He recounted how the sophomore outreach chair for the student council had just confessed to Julian downstairs, becoming the latest in a long line of hopefuls. As usual, Frank lamented with theatrical despair. Julian had walked away without a second glance. The girl was a 5'7" stunner, and he still wasn't interested. Frank wondered aloud if maybe Julian just wasn't into girls. He then turned to Leo, a mischievous glint in his eye, and suggested that Leo should try confessing. If he actually succeeded, he could forget the job search entirely and skip 30 years of hard work. Leo's face fell, the memory of his fragmented, stammering confession from that afternoon flooding back. He'd told Julian he was handsome, that they seemed like a good match. He'd even thrown in that he was good at telling jokes, so dating him would never be boring. When Julian hadn't responded, Leo had feigned a heartbroken expression and made a hasty retreat. He didn't know why Julian had been hurting himself, but he hoped that in that moment, being told he was liked might have soothed some of the darkness, even just a little. With their other roommates away studying for grad school entrance exams, it was just Leo and Frank who headed to the gymnasium the next morning. The career fair was a chaotic sea of people, and the stack of resumes Leo had printed felt laughably inadequate. Frank was already strategizing about starting salaries, believing their skills were worth at least 6 figures. He made a beeline for his target company, while Leo let the current of bodies carry him toward a media firm's booth. When they met up later, Frank's optimism had deflated. He gritted his teeth and declared that an $80,000 starting salary wasn't so bad. He could consider it a contribution to society. After a few more hurried words, he plunged back into the fray. Leo observed the scene, feeling a bit aimless. His dream company, Nexus Media, wasn't present today. They held their own recruitment event on campus. He was mainly here to support Frank. Then he spotted a familiar face in the crowd. Julian was also at the fair, but as an interviewer, surrounded by a cluster of hopeful students. As Leo looked over, their eyes met for a fraction of a second before Julian turned his head, his face a mask of indifference. It seemed the confession hadn't done any lasting damage. At least he hadn't given Julian some kind of complex about being pursued by another guy. That was a relief. Sean appeared out of nowhere, slinging an arm over Leo's shoulder and asking why he never came to get the file yesterday. Leo stiffened, mumbling an excuse about needing to revise his resume. Sean waved it off, saying finding a job was simple and he'd find a great one for Leo right now. Before Leo could protest, Sean was pulling him through the crowd, stopping directly in front of Julian's table. He presented Leo like a prize, reminding Julian that they'd met before and vouching for his friend's outstanding, versatile skills, then asked if Julian was hiring. Julian looked up, his gaze calm and steady on Leo. Just as Leo was praying for the world to swallow him whole, Julian spoke a single word: resume. He acted as if yesterday's confession was a figment of Leo's imagination, his composure absolute. No wonder he had so many fans if he could handle a male admirer with such poise. Leo couldn't help but wonder if Julian now thought he was a stalker, chasing him all the way to a job fair. Julian's tech company, Helios Smart Homes, focused on smart home technology, a completely different field from the media world Leo wanted to enter. Realistically, unless the salary was astronomical, he wouldn't abandon his dream. As expected, Julian quickly shook his head, stating it wasn't a suitable fit. Sean pleaded beside them, telling Julian not to be so harsh, that no one could meet his ridiculous standards. Leo, on the other hand, felt a wave of relief and used the opportunity to make his escape. The second floor overlooked the tennis courts. Leo sat in the viewing area, scrolling through videos on his phone, when a shadow fell over him. He looked up to see Julian's sharp, handsome features. Julian clarified that he hadn't meant Leo wasn't talented, just that the position wasn't right for him. So this was the official rejection of his confession. Determined to see the act through, Leo immediately put on a pained expression, sniffing dramatically. He said he understood that Julian didn't like him and that it was fine. Attraction was a personal thing, and he wouldn't be upset. Julian frowned, explaining that Leo had misunderstood. He was referring to the interview just now. And with that, he turned and strode away, leaving Leo utterly baffled. What did he mean? Was he explaining that his company wasn't a good fit? Or was he telling him that the not suitable comment wasn't a response to yesterday's confession? Leo felt a pang of regret. He didn't know what to say, but things suddenly felt much more complicated. The career fair lasted 3 days. On the morning of the third day, Frank sighed that any job would do, just to have some security and avoid being unemployed upon graduation. But a moment later, after checking his phone, his despair vanished, replaced by vibrant energy. He announced that an opportunity had arrived. Leo was startled, half expecting Frank to reveal he was the secret heir to a Fortune 500 company. Frank dragged him to the campus's outdoor cafe. The junior head of their volunteer club had organized a mixer, As senior members of the Volunteers United Association, there was no way Frank would miss it. He had even prepared a sleek suit, planning to use the career fair as an excuse to avoid looking strange wearing it on campus. It would be the perfect opening to chat with the underclassmen, sharing his job-hunting wisdom. Frank paraded around like a peacock, but while he loved to flirt, he was never sleazy, and he quickly won the admiration of many younger students. During a lull, he leaned over and whispered to Leo, asking if he was doing a good job. He urged Leo to be more proactive, lest he graduate still single. He pointed out a cute girl named Chloe, remarking that she was just Leo's type. Leo had once mentioned in a late-night dorm talk that he had a soft spot for cute girls. Who didn't? Since it was a mixer, games were inevitable, especially the age-old classic that never failed to foster connections, Truth or Dare. In each round, the person with the highest number got to command the person with the lowest. Frank, a master instigator, came up with mischievous but fun ideas for every round, and the atmosphere grew electric. It was Nina's turn, and she had to tell a joke to a guy at a table in the corner. V laughed. She passed. Frank pointed to a table where, even from the back, Leo could tell the guy was exceptionally handsome. Couldn't be. Leo's mind raced. Julian was there, chatting with a friend. Nina must have recognized the campus celebrity too, because after a moment of hesitation, she bravely walked over. The small, adorable girl stood beside Julian and explained her request. Julian, cool and distant, apologized and told her to find someone else. Nina persisted, pleading that it was just a joke. Julian picked up his phone, offering no further reply. The new club members nearby shivered, whispering that the rumors were true. Julian was as cold as they said, refusing to engage in such pointless activities, not even for a moment. Frank huffed in annoyance, then offered a few words of comfort to the dejected Nina. The next round began. The underclassmen looked at Leo with anticipation. The club president had a mischievous smirk. The rule was that if you failed the dare, you had to try again on your next turn, up to 3 times. Before he knew it, Leo was being pushed forward by Frank, who hissed in his ear to go teach that arrogant jerk who thinks his looks and money give him everything a lesson. But having looks and money really did give him everything. Leo's stomach twisted with anxiety. If he were Julian, he'd be sick of him by now. First a confession from a guy, and now that same guy kept popping up everywhere. He just wanted to get this round over with. He approached the table, explained the situation just as Nina had, and braced himself for the same curt dismissal. Instead, Julian put down his phone and looked at him expectantly, asking if he was going to tell the joke. Leo blinked, stunned. After a few seconds, he scratched his head. So, a buck is walking through the forest and he starts going faster and faster, and pretty soon he's a fast buck. Julian's friend, who had just taken a sip of iced tea, choked and sprayed it everywhere, giving Leo a thumbs up and marveling at his ability to find such a terrible old joke. But Julian's lips curved into a faint smile. He had unexpectedly completed the dare. He glanced at the stunned crowd behind Leo, who were now dazedly giving him their own thumbs up, who said old jokes were bad. Some were timeless. Leo said he'd get back to his group and not disturb them, suggesting they get together some other time. Julian's voice, when stripped of its usual cool detachment, was actually very pleasant. He must have understood. They were all adults. He had to have realized that Leo's clumsy excuse about peeling fruit and his poorly executed but well-intentioned confession were meant to help. The friendship between men was often that simple and direct. After this realization, Leo no longer felt like a mouse hiding from a cat whenever he saw Julian. When their eyes met, he would offer a relaxed, easy smile. It was Julian, strangely enough, who started to seem evasive, his gaze always flitting away quickly before he took a sip of his drink. The mixer ended. Frank volunteered to walk the girls back to their dorms. Leo, not wanting to be a third wheel, went to the restroom. When he finally came out, the stars were bright in the night sky. A lone figure stood under a lamppost. His shadow stretched long against the ivy-covered brick wall. Julian was holding a drink, one hand tucked into his pocket. He was waiting. Leo asked softly if he was waiting for him. Julian blinked, looking slightly perplexed, and asked if Leo hadn't been signaling for him to wait. Leo was both amused and exasperated. Julian must have misinterpreted their eye contact as some kind of invitation. Leo told him that wasn't what he meant. Julian replied with a casual "it's fine," but there was a lightness in his tone that suggested he wasn't bothered by the misunderstanding. It was a small thing. They lived in the same building. Walking back together was normal. The path back was quiet. A student rushing to get back before curfew zipped past them on an electric scooter, shouting an apology as he narrowly avoided them. The close call made Julian frown. He had been walking on the right, but now he shifted, positioning himself on Leo's left, closer to the road. He suddenly said that Leo could text him if he ever needed anything. Leo was taken aback but agreed. Then Julian added that he had a basketball game tomorrow at 3, at the second court. When Leo confirmed he knew of it, Julian said he'd see him there, his words quick, his expression hard to read in the dim light. After that brief exchange, they fell back into silence. They parted ways in the dorm hallway. Much later, Frank returned to their room, flushed with success. After a bit of boisterous celebrating, he flopped onto his bed. A message came in from Sean. He reminded Leo to come watch his game tomorrow at the second court. Leo texted back asking how he knew. A moment later, another message from Sean arrived. He mentioned that Julian seemed to be in a great mood today. He'd suddenly told their team captain he wanted to play. Sean figured that while Julian was in a good mood, he would try talking to him again about a job for Leo, telling him not to lose hope. After sending a quick okay, Leo shut off his phone and lay in the dark for a while. He opened Instagram. The first post in his feed was from Julian, who almost never posted. It was a single word, "Good night." The comments were already flooded with friends teasing him, asking who the message was for, speculating that he had a girlfriend. The sheer number of comments from mutual acquaintances was a testament to his campus king status. Feeling buoyed by their friendly interaction earlier, Leo added his own playful comment, "Good night, handsome." Almost instantly, his phone buzzed. Julian had replied. The next day, their academic advisor held a mandatory meeting about employment, so by the time Leo got to the second basketball court, it was already 3:30. Because Julian was playing, the stands were packed. Sean, resting during halftime, spotted him and waved him over. He navigated the crowd and pulled Leo into the prime viewing area. Julian was sitting on the bench, sweat trickling down his neck and into the collar of his jersey. Leo's eyes followed the path of a droplet for a moment before he felt a strange flutter in his chest and quickly looked away. It was truly unfair how Julian was gifted with athletic talent on top of his looks and intelligence. Leo had bought 2 energy drinks. He handed one to Sean and then smilingly placed the other in front of Julian, apologizing for being late because of a last-minute meeting with his advisor. Julian's gaze flickered to Leo's shoulder, then to the person next to him, and he fell silent, merely giving a slight nod to acknowledge the apology. He took the drink but set it aside without touching it. Sean, accustomed to Julian's cold demeanor, laughed it off, telling Leo not to mind him. That was just how Julian was. He then boasted about how well he and Julian had played together in the first half, asking Leo to take some pictures for his parents. Leo agreed absently, a new worry creeping in. He hoped Julian didn't think he was intentionally late. He remembered hearing about someone in the student council getting a harsh lecture from Julian for being tardy. The second half was about to start. As Julian stood up, Leo called out encouragement. "Go, Julian!" Julian paused for a second before heading onto the court. Their opponents were the engineering department's senior team, who seemed determined to make a comeback after a first-half loss. Julian dribbled, evaded, and caught the ball, only to be blocked by several players. Sean, finding an open position, yelled for Julian to pass. Julian glanced at him, then pivoted, broke through the defense from another angle, and sank a perfect three-pointer. The crowd roared. Only Sean stood there, fuming, shouting at Julian, asking what was wrong with him. The rest of the game was dominated by Julian and Sean, but every time Sean called for a pass, Julian ignored him. Sean's frustration grew audible. He yelled at Julian for being a show-off, for wanting all the glory for himself. But the spectators didn't care. They just screamed louder with every basket. Unsurprisingly, their team won. Afterward, a few girls approached Julian with gifts, but he just gave a cool nod and declined them all. The team had planned a celebratory dinner, but Julian just packed his things, ready to head back and change. Outside the court, Leo called his name. Julian stopped, radiating a do-not-approach vibe. He was definitely angry. Leo tried to sound cheerful, complimenting his performance and gently suggesting that a campus celebrity should be more approachable and less intense. He asked if there was anything else. Leo then produced a grape acai smoothie he had bought during a break. He explained earnestly that he really hadn't meant to be late and hoped Julian wouldn't hold it against him. He'd seen Julian drinking one the other night and figured he didn't like energy drinks, so this was his peace offering. He pleaded with him not to be mad. Julian, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips, asked if Leo really thought one cup was enough. Taking this as his cue, Leo offered to go buy another. Julian chuckled softly and took the smoothie, his voice serious as he said he wasn't angry. Leo silently cursed him in his head. Julian's eyes darkened. He asked if Leo was cursing him. Leo quickly denied it. Julian seemed to be in a better mood now. He told Leo he could just say what he wanted. He would listen. He repeated Leo's name, Leo, drawing out the syllables in a way that sounded strange, almost intimate, though Leo couldn't quite place why. But at least the atmosphere had improved. Maybe this was a good moment to subtly influence him, to ensure he wouldn't hurt himself again. He offered to help Julian peel fruit anytime he wanted. The familiar, heavy silence returned. Leo immediately regretted bringing it up, worried he had prodded a painful wound. Just as he was about to apologize, Julian responded. He repeated what he'd said before. Leo could just say what he wanted and he would listen. Leo turned away, unable to meet the intensity in his eyes. But they were good friends now. He promised he would. Becoming good friends with the campus king in his senior year felt surreal, like something worthy of a post on the university forum. Buoyed by this, Leo started sharing funny videos and memes with him. Julian was busy, but he always replied within a couple of hours, sharing snippets of his own life. Overtime at the company, meetings, catered lunches, the view from his office window. His messages were brief and efficient, a habit likely formed from his work life, but it kept the conversation going without feeling intrusive. On Saturday afternoon, Nexus Media's recruitment event finally took place. Frank came along for moral support. The presentation was given by a charismatic and humorous director, Mr. Croft, who had the students hanging on his every word. The The first 2 rounds of interviews were held that same day, whittling down hundreds of applicants to 50 for the 3rd round. Miraculously, Leo made the cut. That Sunday evening, Julian was working late at his office. They were chatting when Leo mentioned the final interview. Julian replied with confidence that Nexus was a perfect fit for him, and he was sure Leo would pass. The conviction in his words gave Leo more of a boost than he could have imagined. He went into the final group interview the next day feeling energized. However, the collaborative task was a disaster. His performance wasn't just imperfect, it was terrible. The realization that he had likely blown his chance with his dream company was a crushing blow. Frank tried to cheer him up, saying there were plenty of other great companies. His other roommates also offered words of comfort. Leo put on a brave face, telling them not to worry, but he went to bed early, feeling defeated. Nexus was known for its fast pace, and the results of the 3rd interview came out the very next day. Other students in the group chat started receiving their notifications. Just as Leo had resigned himself to failure, he received an offer from Nexus. Frank, who was about to offer more consolation, saw the message and joyfully slammed his hand on the desk, exclaiming at how awesome Leo was. That evening, the successful candidates had a final meeting in the same building. Mr. Croft, the director, was all smiles. He clapped his hands to get everyone's attention and began to introduce a special guest, though he noted an introduction was probably unnecessary. He welcomed Julian, who, despite being a campus legend, rarely had time for such events. As the room filled with applause, Julian gave a slight nod. His eyes scanned the crowd, finally landing on Leo, and a small smile touched his lips. Mr. Croft's gaze followed Julian's, and he also smiled faintly at Leo. Leo managed a weak smile in return, but the joy he should have felt was absent. Nexus was the company he wanted to join, but he hadn't performed well. If he were the interviewer, he wouldn't have passed someone like him. So Julian had helped. Even if he hadn't intervened directly, he had likely put in a good word. The reason? Their friendship, or maybe it was hush money. With these complicated thoughts swirling in his mind, Leo couldn't focus on the meeting at all. Afterward, he sent a text asking Julian to meet him in the small garden behind the building. After exchanging a few more words with Mr. Croft, Julian left, and they arrived at the garden one after the other. Leo got straight to the point, his tone clipped, asking if Julian had helped him pass the interview. He told Julian that if he was going to be condescending, he didn't need to be so aggressive. Julian asked if he really thought it was his doing. Leo retorted that his performance had been bad, and there was no reason for Mr. Croft to choose him. He wanted to get into Nexus, but not by pulling strings. He told Julian to call him naive or pretentious, but he didn't want it this way. In the adult world, only results seemed to matter, but on the cusp of entering that world, he wanted to honor his principles just this once. He knew Julian was trying to help, and he should be grateful, but he just couldn't accept it. After his tirade, he finally fell silent, bracing for Julian's reaction. Indifference, scorn, maybe dismissal. But he didn't want these things to fester between them. Julian listened patiently until he was sure Leo was finished. Then he stepped closer, leaning down slightly to look directly into Leo's eyes. He admitted that he and Mr. Croft were indeed acquainted and that he could have helped Leo get a job at Nexus. But he stated firmly he hadn't mentioned Leo to him at all. He asked Leo if he had ever considered that what looked like a poor performance to him might not have seemed that way to an interviewer. Different roles have different perspectives. He told Leo he was talented and unique with his own insights and that Mr. Croft had seen that. He urged him not to sell himself short. Julian had no reason to lie, If he had helped, he would have said so. His words were like a splash of cold water, extinguishing Leo's misplaced anger. But then he asked why had Julian suddenly shown up. He remembered Julian saying he didn't like these kinds of events. The embarrassment of his outburst now made him feel like a fool. He tried to change the subject, hoping Julian wouldn't notice his face, which surely must be beet red. Julian honestly admitted he didn't like them, but he added with equal sincerity he had wanted to see him. He explained that Leo had been so busy preparing for the interview lately that they hadn't seen each other as much, so he came. His expression held a hint of grievance, as if Leo were to blame for him having to attend an event he disliked. Leo felt a pang of guilt, but also a sense that something was off, though he couldn't pinpoint it. Didn't Julian realize how intimate that sounded? But Julian was different. Maybe he had just gotten used to Leo's recent warmth and company. That was normal. Leo asked what he could do to make it up to him. Julian raised an eyebrow, a challenge in his eyes. Leo beat his chest, promising to do anything within his power. Julian leaned in, his face so close Leo could feel the warmth of his breath. Leo froze. Dude, don't mess around, he thought. Before he could say anything, a sharp flick to his forehead made him yelp. Julian asked if it hurt. Leo nodded, rubbing the spot. Julian had really done it. With a soft chuckle, Julian placed his hand on Leo's forehead, his thumb gently rubbing the smarting area. He murmured with satisfaction that it was good that it hurt. In the dim, dappled moonlight, Leo could just make out the faint blush on Julian's cheeks and the red tint of his ears. He froze again. This was not normal. After their talk in the garden, Julian's attentiveness seemed to grow, but it was subtle, never overbearing, like a gentle rain. Yet it was this very subtlety that worried Leo. Felt like Julian was serious. Anyone could tell the difference between friendly concern and something more. The problem was, Leo didn't like men. His confession had been a gesture of care for Julian, nothing more. But he couldn't just tell Julian that now. The well-intentioned lie would instantly become a blade to wound him. The situation had become incredibly difficult. While he was agonizing over this, Frank invited him on a camping trip to the lake. The promise of a large, lively group was a convenient excuse to turn down Julian's invitation to the library. When they arrived, the place was already bustling with over 20 people setting up tents, fishing, and preparing for a barbecue. Leo took on fishing duty and went to the water's edge, ready to show off his skills. Half an hour later, the bobber hadn't moved except when stirred by the wind. Just as he was getting frustrated, Julian appeared, reaching for the fishing rod and offering to try. Leo brushed him off, saying he was fine, and casually switched the rod to his other hand. He asked Julian how he found him. Julian was about to answer when his presence seemed to register fully with Leo, and he instinctively scooted away. Julian paused, then fell silent. Leo knew that prolonging the inevitable was useless. He stated directly that they had been getting along well, and that it was fate to have met a good friend like him before graduation. Anyone with a brain could understand the subtext. The best thing to do now would be to let it go gracefully. But Julian didn't. He simply asked if Leo's recent evasiveness was because he had finally figured things out. Leo was speechless for a moment, stammering as he tried to find the right words. Hurting Julian again felt too cruel. He was panicking when, thankfully, Frank appeared, a half-eaten kebab in hand, calling for him to come try the first batch of barbecue. He greeted Julian and offered him some as well. Though Frank was often jealous of Julian's popularity and talent, it never went beyond harmless grumbling. After extending the invitation, Frank pulled Leo aside and whispered tearfully that Julian must have come for him. and now he wouldn't be the most handsome guy at the party anymore. Leo cautiously glanced at Julian, then quickly looked away. He was sitting by the water, gazing at the sky, calm and serene. While everyone else was laughing and playing, they had invited Julian to join, but he had politely declined. Leo felt a headache coming on, but in the end, he took a plate of barbecue over to him. He told him one of the girls had a family recipe he should try. Julian looked at him, then finally reached for a skewer. The atmosphere was tense. Leo, desperate, offered to tell another bad joke. Julian just grunted in response. Leo felt like a villain from a soap opera, toying with someone's emotions. As he struggled with his guilt, Julian spoke. He said that Leo didn't need to try so hard. His face was practically screaming for help. He told Leo he understood what he was trying to say earlier and knew he was probably trying to figure out how to let him down gently. So he said he would go first. He had seriously considered Leo's confession, and he wanted to try being with him. He'd said it. Wasn't Julian supposed to be the cool, aloof type? How could he just say that so directly? Didn't he have any reservations? Had he thought about the consequences of saying such a thing? What was Leo supposed to do now? If he rejected him outright, would Julian get hurt again? Then Julian added that his feelings had nothing to do with anyone else. It was only about Leo. He asked him to seriously consider it. The Julian he was getting to know was much more than just a successful young entrepreneur. He wasn't arrogant or condescending. He didn't judge people by their appearance, and he respected others' principles. Plus, he was handsome and capable. A rapid-fire list of pros and cons ran through Leo's head, and he quickly realized something was wrong. It felt like his defenses were being breached. It's normal to develop a sense of dependency on someone who shows you care and affection. It's also normal to develop a crush on someone so exceptional. But it would be ridiculous to mistake that for love. However, even Frank had noticed the sudden downturn in his and Julian's relationship. He cornered Leo at the first opportunity, asking why they had suddenly grown distant after seeming to get along so well. He noted that Julian didn't come around anymore. Leo mumbled that Julian was busy, and they were both seniors with their own priorities. Frank scoffed, saying it was just a casual question, and asked why Leo was getting so defensive. Leo immediately denied it, but Frank was skeptical. He pointed out that Leo had clearly looked unhappy the moment he mentioned Julian not visiting. Leo didn't want to argue. Frank changed the subject, reminding him that the university's field day had been postponed to the next week and that he needed to prepare for the high jump. Leo gave a non-committal response and went downstairs for a walk. He found himself wandering toward the main plaza. As luck or misfortune would have it, Julian was also passing by. He was with a group from the student council, including the junior president, Isabella, who seemed to be on very familiar terms with him, laughing and talking easily. Leo wanted to avoid them, but before he could react, they had walked right past him. Nothing happened. No awkward greetings, just a normal passing by. Leo watched a bird fly past and felt a strange sense of melancholy. What a boring, frustrating day. The opening ceremony of the field day ended, and the events began. The weather wasn't great. A light drizzle started to fall. Julian and Isabella stood on the officials' platform. The student reporters and broadcast team were set up nearby. Isabella was pretty and capable, and she didn't look out of place next to Julian. They chatted and laughed, making a striking pair. Leo wondered if Julian even liked her. Frank nudged him, telling him to get to the check-in for his event. Following Leo's gaze, he saw Julian and Isabella inside, commenting on how perfect the campus goddess and god looked together. Leo was shocked. He reminded Frank that he usually couldn't stand Julian. Frank replied that this was different. Julian and Isabella together were a perfect match, which meant the goddess wouldn't be with him, and Julian would no longer be attracting other girls. Leo squinted, concluding that they didn't actually seem that close. Frank looked at him as if he had uncovered a great secret, exclaiming that he understood now. Leo was in love with him. Leo denied it. Frank then declared that Leo was in love with Isabella. Simultaneously, they both blurted out their denials. Leo insisting he didn't like Isabella, and Frank insisting he didn't like Julian. Frank gave him a look. Of course, he knew Leo didn't like Julian. He then bragged that Leo was no match for him. The goddess would never be with him, so he should just give up. Leo breathed a sigh of relief and headed for the high jump area. The competition went as expected. He made it into the top 10 before being eliminated. He hobbled off the field, clutching his aching back, and retired to the rest area. A volunteer named Wendy, wearing an association armband, kindly helped him and brought him water and snacks. Frank eventually saw them chatting and, with a grin, told Leo that his luck with the ladies was finally turning. He started peppering him with questions about what they talked about and whether she had confessed yet. He was being so nosy that Leo had to push him away, reminding him he had a final to prepare for. Frank boasted about his own natural talent, then offered to be Leo's love guru. As he was bragging, he accidentally bumped into Julian, who was with Sean, both in athletic gear. Sean greeted Leo, asking how his event went and apologizing for missing it because he had his own competition. Leo's gaze automatically shifted to Julian, who was staring off into the distance, completely silent. Leo sighed internally. After a brief exchange with Sean, he made a hasty retreat. Staying any longer would just make things awkward for Julian. Frank's event wasn't over, so Leo didn't leave the track. He found an empty classroom on the second floor of the grandstand and started playing a game on his phone. From the adjacent stairwell, he heard familiar voices. Sean and Julian were talking about their dorm. Leo was about to leave, not wanting to eavesdrop, but Sean's next words stopped him cold. "You like Leo, don't you? Are you crazy?" Leo thought, "What if someone hears?" But then Julian replied, "You're crazy too." Sean let out a breath, admitting he hadn't expected Julian to confess so readily. He asked how it happened, since they had only gotten to know each other recently. He said if it wasn't for the fact that Julian couldn't stop smiling whenever Leo called, he never would have guessed. Julian didn't offer a lengthy explanation. He just said that when you like someone, you just do. Sean's tone turned serious. He reminded Julian that neither of them had ever been into guys before. He asked if Julian was sure it wasn't just friendship. He brought up the societal challenges, Julian's company, his father, Leo's family, and Leo's future. Julian's answer was clear and confident. He knew, and if they were together, they could overcome all of it. Sean, knowing his friend's determination, sighed and asked about his progress. He mentioned that, as Julian had just heard from Frank, a younger student was pursuing Leo and asked what Julian planned to do. He warned him that if Leo liked the girl, he would support him, and Julian had better not cause any trouble. Julian's reply was firm. He asked why he should stop someone from liking Leo. His love for Leo and someone else's feelings for him were two separate things. Leo had the right to choose, to accept him, to reject him, or to accept someone else. That was his freedom. Julian said that loving Leo didn't make him his possession, but he would be better to him to add more weight to his side of the scale. If Leo liked the wind, he would chase the wind with him. If he liked the stars, he would chase the stars with him. If he liked to travel, he would travel with him. Until Leo chose him, stood by his side. Sean was stunned. After a moment, he clapped Julian on the shoulder, his own emotions clearly stirred. Leo, equally moved, was about to leave when he heard Julian's final words. He said he would wait for his answer no matter how long it took. The field day lasted 3 days. On the third day, Leo just had to show up as a spectator to cheer for his department. The damp, chilly air seeped into his bones. Wendy appeared with a variety of snacks, offering him a sweet corn. She sat beside him, and they chatted while watching the events. Looking at her, Leo could picture it. Falling in love with a cute, gentle girl. Working hard at a job he liked, saving up for a house, planning a wedding, and then starting a happy family. He would work even harder to provide for them, watch them grow, and then retire, seeing his own children get married and have families of their own before growing old. It was an ordinary, simple life he had imagined many times. With Julian, however, he couldn't predict how long his feelings would last. They would face countless societal and familial obstacles. Choosing Julian was like switching life to hard mode. Why bother? He asked himself repeatedly. In the middle of the day, he went to the restroom and ran into Sean on his way out. Sean invited him to lunch and they chatted idly. He mentioned that Julian was probably off somewhere sulking. He'd had a huge fight with his father and had wanted to be alone. Leo's first thought was to wonder if he was okay. Sean laughed, saying Julian was tough as nails. But even the strongest people have their breaking points. Leo asked if Julian had taken anything with him. Sean thought for a moment and said he'd seen him with something, but he wasn't sure what. A terrible fear seized Leo. He raced up to the 3rd floor and finally found Julian on the rooftop. He was standing near the edge. "Oh God, don't jump." Leo shouted his name. Julian turned, a black plastic bag in his hand that looked like it could be hiding a weapon. Leo rushed forward and snatched the bag from him before he could say anything. Only then did he feel a sense of relief. He greeted him. Julian, understanding the source of his panic, asked what he thought he was doing. Self-harm? He laid it all out in the open with that one look, just as he had when he said Leo could just be direct with him. Leo told him that, no matter what, he should never hurt himself. Julian agreed immediately. Then, with a look of resigned amusement, he suggested Leo look inside the bag. It was full of beer cans. Not a weapon, just beer. Leo let out a few deep breaths. He handed the bag back to Julian, saying that if he was okay, he wouldn't disturb him. It seemed Julian just wanted to be alone for a bit. He had overreacted. But Julian's gaze intensified. He asked Leo what he had decided. Leo felt like a mouse who had walked right into a trap. He stammered for him to wait, that he needed more time, then fled downstairs, his heart pounding in his chest. The potential difficulties of that choice were a constant. Could love really be enough to overcome everything? After the final awards ceremony, staff began clearing the field for the evening's fireworks show, a celebration for a graduate student team that had won a major international award. By 6, the sky was completely dark, and the field was packed. Leo stood near the long jump pit, waiting. Soon, the sky exploded with brilliant, dazzling light. The air filled with the scent of celebration and the sound of amazed gasps. A clear, gentle voice spoke his name beside him. It was Julian. He had found him. In the flashing, ephemeral light of the fireworks, amidst the cheering crowd, Leo reached out his hand. He said softly that he had made up his mind. Life is short. Why not take a chance? Julian had said he would chase the wind, the stars, and travel the world with him. Leo couldn't remain indifferent. He knew even then that he was falling for him. Every promise Julian made was about companionship, and the premise was always what Leo wanted. He wasn't just offering him a perfect world. He was offering to build one with him. And yes, it's normal to become attached to someone who shows you kindness. It's normal for that to spark something more. Even if the fire eventually fades and they face countless hardships, at this moment, he had to seize the present. Julian turned to face him, his eyes glistening. He reached out, his fingers intertwining with Leo's, holding his hand tightly. He said he was so happy. Leo replied that he was too. Brave people get to enjoy love first. So he was brave, wasn't he? They left before the fireworks ended, their clasped hands inconspicuous in the dense crowd. They walked in comfortable silence, their hands growing stickier with sweat, yet neither wanted to let go. They crossed the main quad and passed the library, and soon they were at their dorm. It had all gone by too fast. Leo sighed. Julian frowned, clearly wanting to say something more. Leo teased him, telling his new boyfriend to just say it. Julian's eyes lit up, but he became flustered, stammering until he finally managed to say that he thought it was too early to go back. It was a mutual feeling. They turned around and walked the path all over again, not returning until nearly 11. Julian walked him to his floor before heading back to his own. Watching his retreating back, Leo felt the time had been far too short. The lingering warmth on his hand was proof that his boyfriend had just been there. Back in his room, he got a message from Julian almost immediately. "Leo, I want to see you." Leo couldn't help but laugh. It had only been a few minutes. He texted back that they needed to save some moments for the future. Then he let out another long, dramatic sigh. His roommates noticed. Frank asked what was wrong. Leo couldn't very well say he had just gotten a boyfriend and already missed him, despite them living in the same building. The next moment, Julian sent a new message, a selection of matching couple avatars. "Boyfriend, please choose." He could almost picture the smug look on Julian's face. He chose one that was cute but not too obvious. His body was always more honest than his brain. He found himself secretly searching for advice on what to do when you're a senior in college and just got a boyfriend. It was all a bit overwhelming. He took a few selfies under the covers, trying to get a good angle of his collarbone, and sent the best one to Julian with the caption, "Bedtime bonus." Frank's bed was next to his, and he leaned over, squinting, asking what Leo was doing and who he was sending suggestive pictures to. Leo stammered that he thought he had a pimple. Frank grunted, saying he'd better not be dating without his expert guidance. Leo agreed meekly, hiding a smile. Julian's birthday was in December. Leo wanted to get him a gift that was more personal than something store-bought and decided to knit him a scarf. The online tutorials made it look easy. But after a week of work, even Frank, who had initially been skeptical, had to admit the finished product was something. The scarf was comically ugly. The stitches were uneven, the pattern was wonky, and the dimensions were all wrong. Yet when Leo gave it to Julian, he was ecstatic. He immediately posted a picture of it on Instagram with the caption, "Winter warmth." The comments were merciless. Friends joked about where he had bought such a uniquely hideous felt creation and said the craftsmanship was so bad it warranted a complaint to the Better Business Bureau. Julian simply replied in the comments, "It's a gift." I told him he didn't have to get me anything, but he insisted. "I love it." The comment section exploded with speculation about the campus king's new girlfriend. Julian was invited to be a judge for the campus singing competition, and Leo went along to listen to the music. Julian was seated at the judge's table, looking serious. The judge next to him, Ryan, remarked that Julian's scarf looked nice and asked if it was also a gift from his partner. Julian, feigning complaint, said he thought it was too flashy, but his boyfriend had insisted on knitting it for him. Ryan rolled his eyes, telling Julian he was there to be a judge, not to show off, pointing out the ridiculously happy smile that betrayed his complaint. A few girls, still holding out hope, approached Julian to ask if he really was dating someone. Julian nodded without hesitation, confirming that he was very much in love. When they asked who it was, he shook his head, saying they would find out eventually, but not now. He then spotted Leo sitting a few rows behind him, and his expression faltered. He quickly sent a text. "I wasn't complaining, I was just teasing him." Then another, "If you don't like it, you can have it back." And another, "I'm serious, I love it. It's beautiful and comfortable and perfect for my neck." Leo had to laugh. After he'd finished knitting it, he'd realized just how ugly the scarf was. He wouldn't even wear it himself. But Julian was parading it around like a prized possession. Leo teased him a bit before settling in. Julian texted again, "Leo, come sit next to me." Leo replied that he wasn't a judge. Julian sent back a sad emoji. Ryan finally had enough, telling Julian to focus because the show was starting. Julian leaned over and whispered something to Ryan, and a moment later, Ryan came and escorted Leo to the empty seat on Julian's left. Under the table, Leo's fingers found Julian's hand. He traced the word boyfriend into his palm. Julian, who always lit up at that word, immediately squeezed his hand, whispering for him to behave. Eventually, even Frank figured it out. He confronted Leo, his voice full of mock betrayal, asking if they were still best friends. Leo admitted he had been wrong not to tell him, but explained that their situation was complicated. He and Julian had an unspoken agreement not to make their relationship public. It was a precaution in case they broke up. Julian had a bright future, and he didn't need the gossip that would follow a failed relationship. Frank grew serious. He said that while he didn't know much about guys dating, he knew that Leo couldn't start a relationship already planning for the end. He asked if Leo had even discussed these fears with Julian. Leo insisted it was a mutual understanding, but Frank pressed him, asking if he was sure. His words shattered the fragile bubble of happiness Leo had built. He was worried about the impact on Julian if they went public, worried that Julian couldn't handle the pressure and would leave, worried that he himself would give up under the scrutiny of others. But hiding their relationship was unfair to Julian. At the student council's Christmas masquerade ball, Julian was dressed as a dashing nobleman, and Leo wore a wizard costume. When someone asked Julian to dance, he politely declined, saying his boyfriend would get jealous. But when friends asked Leo to dance, he hesitated, then agreed. He saw Julian watching, saying nothing, just tapping at his phone. A moment later, Leo's phone was flooded with pictures from Julian of every dessert and fruit at the party that he thought Leo would like. Julian, the star of every event, was busy circling a table for him. Why does someone like him like me? Leo wondered. The answer didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that Julian had already faced these questions alone. He hadn't just stumbled into this. He had fought through his own confusion and fear and then run toward Leo. He had done more than enough. "Excuse me, can I have this dance?" Wendy asked, gathering her courage. Leo, full of apology, told her he was sorry. At that moment, Frank, dressed as a ninja, swooped in and asked Wendy to dance, telling her Leo was a terrible dancer. Leo gave Frank a grateful look and then walked toward Julian, who was standing alone, looking a bit lost. Leo held out his hand, his voice trembling slightly as he asked Julian if he could have this dance. Julian's yes was equally shaky. As the music swelled and they stepped closer, under the watchful eyes of many, Leo whispered, "Julian, I like you." Julian replied, "I know. Me too." He wasn't good with romantic words, but he had to say it. His feelings had long since become real. I really, really like you. More than you know. Just then, the first snowflakes of winter began to fall. Julian held him closer and whispered back, the same. The news of their relationship spread like wildfire. The picture of the wizard and the handsome nobleman dancing was all over the campus confession pages. Frank made a grand announcement on his social media, declaring that his senior year roommate was officially off the market with the best and most handsome guy around. The post was flooded with blessings and support. Ryan from the singing competition joked about his exclamation point key breaking from excitement. Even Wendy commented on how handsome her senior was. The positive comments quickly drowned out the few negative ones. Later, Leo asked Julian why he had been so confident, so sure that he wouldn't be rejected. Julian shook his head. He confessed that he wasn't as magnanimous as he seemed. He had been jealous of Frank's closeness with Leo, of Sean calling him by his nickname, of him dancing with other people. He had been so anxious he had wanted to hide Leo away where only he could see him. But, he said, he was even more terrified that Leo would start to hate him. He looked at Leo, worried that this confession of his less-than-perfect nature would change things. Leo feigned annoyance, telling Julian that as a CEO, he should know Leo didn't think he was some pure, innocent saint. A strange look crossed Julian's face, and then he asked, "Can I kiss you?" Then, the sudden shift caught Leo off guard, but he coughed and said, "Do what you want." A soft kiss landed on his lips, gentle and warm, with the faint scent of woodsy cologne. "Are you wearing perfume?" Leo asked. Julian replied with a husky focus, then gave his lower lip a nibble. Leo quickly collected himself, remembering that this was the man who had just admitted to wanting to lock him away. It was probably best to be agreeable. After the new year, many seniors left for internships. Leo also started his at Nexus Media early, renting an apartment off campus. Julian could only sulk, though he would still show up every night demanding cuddles. One evening after work, a Rolls-Royce was parked outside the building. The driver led him to the back seat, where Julian's father, Julian Keller, a renowned entrepreneur, was waiting. He took Leo to a private restaurant and, once the food was served, got straight to the point. He wanted Leo to leave his son. He made the classic offer from the movies. Leo just nodded, remarking that the food was excellent and Mr. Keller should try it. Mr. Keller was not pleased. He told Leo not to play games. He sneered, asking if Leo really understood Julian, if he knew about the self-harm. Leo was stunned. Mr. Keller knew. How could a father speak of his son with such contempt? He called Julian a coward, pathetic for choosing such a method of rebellion. For the first time, Leo felt a surge of real anger. He told Mr. Keller that he knew Julian was strong and brilliant, and he didn't believe he was rebelling because he felt powerless. He suggested that maybe it was because his own father kept pressuring him, and not wanting to hurt him, he chose to hurt himself instead. Mr. Keller didn't believe it. He said Leo was different from what he expected, which explained why Julian had been so stubborn about breaking up. But it was all pointless. Leo ignored him and continued eating. Julian arrived. Before he entered, Mr. Keller had Leo moved to an inner room. Leo could almost see the cliché playing out. But when Mr. Keller told Julian that Leo had accepted his offer and they were through, Julian simply continued to eat his meal in silence. Then he put down his chopsticks. "It's no use, Dad. I won't agree to transfer back to the main group. I have my own goals, and I won't break up with Leo. I love him. I can't live without him." Enraged, Mr. Keller slapped him across the face. Julian took it without flinching. Then he walked to the inner room, opened the door and said, "Let's go home, Leo." He took Leo's hand and walked out, a quiet, powerful act of defiance. Outside, he looked at Leo with heartbroken eyes, apologizing for putting him through that, his own eyes red like a wounded puppy's. Leo's own heart ached. He asked why Julian hadn't told him his father had been giving him trouble. Julian said his father had forbidden it. Leo pressed, saying it concerned him too. Julian nodded. "I need your support. Without your love, I don't know if I could keep going." He confessed that on the day of the incident in the dorm, his father had once again demanded he shut down his company and take a position at the family conglomerate. They had a massive fight. It was a pattern that had defined his past. He was exhausted, and in that dark moment, when he felt like he was drowning, Leo had appeared, telling him he liked him, that they were a good match, that being with him wouldn't be boring. "My Leo," he whispered, "just you being here is enough." At that moment, Leo couldn't help but feel a profound sense of gratitude that Sean had sent him for that file, and that he had chosen to push the door open instead of knocking and leaving. What if he hadn't? How long would Julian have been left to drown? "Julian," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I will always, always be with you, no matter what." It was the most important promise he would ever make. Julian looked at him, his gaze serious. "I'm holding you to that." Love wasn't a burden. It was armor. It was courage. And it was a fierce, unspoken trust. He was so glad that in his senior year, he had fallen in love with a man as good as Julian. "Let's go home," Leo said. "And tonight, shower early." The deeply emotional campus king's face turned beet red. He gripped Leo's hand and quickened his pace, as if rushing toward some grand, wonderful event. A lifetime was long. This was a good way to live it.